Hello, my friends. Welcome to Lindy's Magpie Reads. This is a place where I talk about books, and I have finished 8 books since last week, so I want to get to those very quickly. But first, what else has been going on? I went to a fantastic concert, a group from Inner Mongolia, Anda Union. And they are on tour in North America right now. So if you see that they're coming to your city, go. You won't regret it. In addition to doing amazing things with their vocal cords, they have throat singing, it's the kinds of instruments that they had, these horse head fiddles, square fiddles, and a kind of flute that while you're playing it, you're also singing, so your mouth is not completely closed around the flute. You use your lips and tongue to kind of block off that airway. And the music was just so peppy and full of energy and celebratory, and I loved it. I just loved it. I'm going to include a link to their website below. So there's this 1-minute teaser so you can see a little bit about what their style is like. And what else? We've got visitors coming, different groups of visitors coming this weekend. So there's been a lot of house cleaning prep, and I baked matrimonial squares today. Some people call these date squares, or in my mom's recipe book that I used, her old lab tech cookbook, it's called matrimonial cake. Basically a crumb layer with oatmeal and then dates in the middle and then more crumbs on top. So just yumminess. And what else? Oh, I also sewed some napkins to match the new patchwork tablecloth that I told you about. Oh, and I have been doing a lot of rowing. So I've been out on the gorge 4 or 5 times already, and feels good. Okay, on to the books, starting with Hammajang Luck by Makana Yamamoto. They're a non-binary author. They grew up in Maui and now live in New England with their wife. And the central character in here is non-binary, that's Edie. This is set on a space station in the middle of the 22nd century. And before I tell you more about the book, I want to tell you why I picked it up. I want to thank Daisy of Daisy X Makana channel. I will include a link down below. They do this series of videos called Shelve It or Shove It, where they look at new release titles and based primarily on the cover, but also knowledge of the author and the description of the book, decide whether or not it's something that they're going to give a try. And I can relate so much because you all know we do rely on covers. And also, there's way too many books. We have to make decisions. We can't read them all, even if they all sound great. So if you're not familiar with Daisy's channel, they are a specialist in reading speculative fiction and mystery as well, but there's some really interesting, informative videos on subgenres. And she also posts some Dragging Ms. Daisy, Get Ready With Me videos, if you like to see drag transformations. Which reminds me that this weekend we have brunch reservations for a drag brunch at the Vicious Poodle in downtown Victoria. So I can report back on that next week. All right, back to our book. Hammajang Luck There's a lot of Hawaiian pidgin in here, which the Hammajang is one of those Hawaiian words. It means disorganized or disorderly, something like that, a ramshackle kind of luck, which Edie does have. They need it. At the start of the book, they have just been released from 8 years in prison, and the person there to pick them up is none other than the person who's responsible for them being imprisoned. And there is a friends to enemies to lovers and beyond. There's a roller coaster that goes on between these two. And romance is not something that I usually enjoy, but there was enough other stuff, like the vocabulary, the Hawaiian pidgin that I mentioned, and the character of Edie. They're prickly and yet also very loving and close to their sister and their sister's kids and the people in their community on this space station where they live, Kepler. Their best friend, Sai, is a trans man who's had a lot of high-tech body modifications, like a cybernetic eye, for example. The blend of relationships between characters, because we meet a whole bunch more characters because the plot of this book is a heist, a very high-stakes heist, and the special talents are needed from a whole range of characters, or a group that gets together to pull this off, if they can. And in order for them to work together, well, Edie's got to trust this Angel, the woman who met them when they were released from prison. Some of the story elements gave me pause, like the fact that Edie smokes, and people remind her that smoking will kill you. I'm thinking, smoking on a space station where you have to create air? That didn't make sense. Edie wears a leather jacket, and again, I'm thinking, how? Later on, there's mention that people mostly have electronic pets because it's too expensive and difficult to have real live animals on the space station. Balloons are used to decorate for a party, and again, I'm thinking, it seems like we'd be beyond that in the 22nd century. But oh yeah, there are mom and pop little businesses like a flower shop, and I'm thinking, on a space station? I mean, later on we learn that they've got a hydroponic flower growing operation, but still, it just seemed, some of the things seemed pretty unlikely. What did strike me as more likely is bioluminescent tattoos and having a memorial wall instead of a graveyard, that sort of thing. Now, even more than the romance in here, the thing that I had to get past in order to enjoy this book, and I did enjoy it, was the pace. This is a really fast-paced novel, and I prefer a medium to slow pace. And so I would read a couple of chapters and then read something else with a slower pace, and then come back to this, read a bit, back, and then return to something else. So that's what I do for books that aren't exactly to my taste, and yet I'm still interested in. And in the end, I find really rewarding, like this one. Next, another speculative fiction, and this one is by a Korean-American author, Ed Park. It's called Same Bed, Different Dreams, and I listened to it in audio. I had previously read one thing by Ed Park, and it's this little short story. It's only 10 pages long. That was in my short story Advent calendar for 2024. And I learned that Ed Park does have a short story collection coming out in July, An Oral History of Atlantis. Same Bed, Different Dreams was a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize. It won the LA Times Fiction Prize. And I had been kind of interested in it, but it's such a fat book. It's over 500 pages. But my friend Sarah over at Roadworthy, she said, there's a Tim Hortons reference in it. And she listened to it in audio, 19 hours in audio. So I decided to give it a try. So glad I did. Great decision. There are 3 narrators in the audio production and 3 different storylines that are eventually intertwined. It's a very complex, layered story. We've got Soon Shin, who's a not successful writer, so he ends up working for a tech company that's very much like Google, except this one is called Gloat. Nobody knows what those letters stand for. It might be good luck on all that. There's a fair bit of humor in this book, by the way. Anyway, Sheen, for reasons that you find out in the story, ends up reading this manuscript that is a history of the Korean Provisional Government. And this is an alternate history of the Korean Provisional Government, the KPG, which really did exist from 1919 until I think 1945, something like that. They were the government in exile in China while Korea was occupied by the Japanese. So there's Soon Shin's storyline, there's the manuscript, and then there's also an African-American science fiction writer, Parker, who's a veteran of the Korean War. There's so many weird, strange things going on, stuff that is true, like the shooting down of a Korean passenger jet by the Russians, by the Soviets in, I think it was 1983. Soon has a dog who has dementia, and he keeps burying chunks of paper in the ground, and so this manuscript keeps getting what Soon calls archived underground, and he has to wait for the dog to dig it up to get the next section to read about. It's all divided up into dreams, this manuscript, so there is a somewhat dreamy quality to the narrative. There's a whole bunch of pop culture of all kinds. There's National Hockey League and how the Buffalo Sabres got their name. And actually, this is where the Tim Hortons comes in. If you are interested, I do collect Tim Hortons references on my blog, so I will link that in the description box. And also, if any of you are wondering, is Tim Hortons still a Canadian company? I recently read an article about that by the CBC, so I am going to link that article also. There's a character in here who in the 1980s is joking about putting a microchip in a person's brain, and that is something that happens in Hammajang luck. We've got a character in there who's directly wired to the internet through microchips, so I just like the serendipity of the correspondence there. There were many other connections between books, which I might mention some of them as I go through the other titles. But to sum up, Same Bed, Different Dreams is wide-ranging, surprising, fun, and also heartbreaking. It's excellent. Next, I have a work of nonfiction about the artist Jin-me Yoon, Life and Work. And this is written by Ming Tiampo, and it's put out by the Canadian Art Library. The reason I picked this up is because I saw that recently the winners of the Governor General Awards for Arts were announced, and Jin-me Yoon was one of the recipients. Her work is mostly in photography and video. She does a lot of conceptual work. Her early works have become touchstones in the articulation of Canadian identity and race. I hadn't actually realized that I had seen her work before at the Vancouver Art Gallery, a specific exhibit called The Group of 67. And in this book, it's described as challenging the dominance of the work of the Group of Seven and Canadian landscape painting. There were so many other Canadian artists who were referenced in here, some that I was familiar with, some that I'm not or hadn't been previously. I will link a couple down below, a couple of Indigenous artists you might be interested in, Sunny Asu and Lawrence Paul Yaxwellupton. Another thing mentioned in this book is that Yoon takes inspiration from artists in the Korean diaspora like Teresa Hak Kyung Cha, whose groundbreaking multilingual book Dictée, which came out in 1982, foregrounds dislocation and fragmented memory. So that book, Dictée, is also mentioned in Same Bed, Different Dreams. And I had heard of it previously because Bibliosophie, the booktuber, in her best books of 2024, had that book on the list. So I had taken a note thinking, maybe I should read that. Now it's moving higher up on that TBR. Yoon's work is addressing gender, feminism, motherhood and creativity, time, history, memory. The project that Yoon did called The Dreaming Collective Knows No History is critiquing the future-focused historical amnesia of post-war populations like in Korea. And between that and the burial mounds and memorial poles, it was a perfect accompaniment to this next book, which I listened to in audio. We Do Not Part by Han Kang. It was translated from Korean by Yaewon and Paige Aniyah Morris, and the audiobook is read by Greta Jung. Han Kang is a Nobel laureate in literature. The only previous book I'd read by her is The Vegetarian, which I quite liked. This book I loved. It is the story of two friends, Kyung-ha and In-son. At the beginning of the book, we meet Kyung-ha when she's contemplating suicide. She gets a call from her friend In-son. She hasn't heard from her for quite a while, and she has a very special favor to ask of Kyung-young, who ends up traveling through a blizzard to the island of Jeju, and the to accomplish the request. Now, the poetic language in here about snow, about the storm, the many obstacles that Kyung-ha has to overcome in order to accomplish what her friend has asked of her, I found just so engaging. Here's a sample. Like a pair of scissors gliding through a giant sheet of muslin, my mother strode on, cleaving the wind with her body. In that moment, with her blouse and loose trousers billowing out, she loomed as large as a giant to me. This is a book about unspeakable horrors and how does one endure. And there's a character who says that love is a terrible agony. And the thousands of murders that happened on the island of Jeju are chronicled in here. So this is not a book that's easy on the heart, but the way that it's done, I found so much better than when I encountered it in another book, The Island of the Sea Women by Lisa C., which is also set on Jeju. And I found that the depiction of in particular children and their deaths in Island of the Sea Women was sensationalized and in a way disrespectful, whereas babies die in We Do Not Part as well. But it's the way that it's depicted is like night and day as far as I'm concerned. If you're interested in Korean history, by the way, going further back, I have an author to recommend to you, and that is the Korean-Canadian writer Jun-her, that's H-U-R, and one of her novels is set on the island of Jeju back in 1426. The Forest of Stolen Girls. I've got another Nobel laureate to tell you about. I listened to The Empusium by Olga Tokarczuk, translated from Polish by Antonia Lloyd-Jones. This is set in a tuberculosis sanatorium in the Silesian Mountains in 1913. And the central character is a frail Polish engineering student, Mieczysław Wojnich. There's something strange going on here. There's definitely echoes, elements of dark fairy tales. It's a horror story with something unnamed and sinister kind of hanging over the narrative. Something is there in the forest. Mutilated bodies have been found there. There's a strange rate of people dying. There are strange mushrooms. There's this liqueur that everybody drinks at the guest house where Voynich is staying. And so much of this book is about misogyny. When I got to the end and heard the long list of authors who are quoted in the book, lines from people across centuries, what men have said about women, it was just the icing on the cake for me. Voynich's doctor blames mothers for everything. including Voynich's kind of ladylike fragility. So Voynich explains that his mother died when he was really young. And the doctor says, oh, well, it's a pity she died, but that doesn't mean she's blameless. She left you when you needed her most. And later on, he tells Voynich, to make up for her absence, you identify with her in a dangerous way. Hence this ladylike effeminacy, this softness. Voynich shrank inside himself. Now, my lad, don't snivel. Don't capitulate. You must get a grip on yourself. Even the toughest men melt like jelly when they're subjected to a woman's tricks, and that includes women acting from beyond the grave. So, besides the role of women in society, the men who are there to be cured also have these other topics of discussion. And here's a sample of the wonderful way that Tokarczuk puts things. The gentlemen began to lecture each other, each pulling the topic over to his side like a too small quilt. And here's a line that is very much resonant with what's going on in politics right now. I, my dear sir, believe that democracy is a sham system. It always has an element of fear and inherently tends to bring out a strong leader who will push towards building an autocracy. And I'll leave you with that. I thought this was great. Next, I have another fairy tale-like kind of story, The Juniper Tree by Barbara Comyns. This was first published in 1985, and I heard about it on Marilyn Maya Mendoza's channel. And thank you, Maya. This is fantastic. Another great book. The introduction in this edition is by Sadie Steins, and she calls it unsentimental magic realism. There really is not much of there's so little of the fantastical in here, and yet I could see how it follows the very macabre story of the juniper tree, which is in brief form at the beginning, so you can refresh your memory if you want. You start to read this. There are magpies in here. There's a wonderful, wonderful character, a single mother by the name of Bella, and it's weird and it's so satisfying. Another story about a tree. This one is a children's picture book, Kenzie's Little Tree, by two Canadian creators, Alison McGauley and the illustrator Emilie Leduc. And this is a story of a little girl who, when her parents go to a nursery to get some bedding plants in the spring, she falls in love with a little sapling and convinces her parents to buy it, and they plant it together. And Kenzie's mother has a chronic illness, and so Kenzie worries about her mother. She also worries about her little tree. We see it through the seasons, but she is reassured that not only is her mother stronger than she seems, but so is the little tree. This is a great way to talk to children about chronic illness. And last up, a work of nonfiction about trees, The Tree Collectors, Tales of Arboreal Obsession, and it's by Amy Stewart. She's the author and the illustrator. There's lots of wonderful watercolor illustrations in here. I love reading about people who have obsessive passions. And this is a collection of about 50 different people around the world who are obsessed with trees. And yay! Oh, people who collect trees. It's wonderful. One person in here that I had heard of before is the cherry tree collector, Collingwood Ingram, because he's talked about in the book Sakura Obsession by Naoko Abe. Other profiles brought to mind different books. So I like to read about trees. I learned about Alan Nichols, who's a chestnut researcher in New York State. That profile reminded me of Barbara Kingsolver's book Prodigal Summer, because the chestnut blight is talked about in there as well. There's an apple preservationist in Oregon, Joni Cooper, who has 4,500 apple varieties. So I can also recommend the book The Ghost Orchard by Helen Humphreys to go with that. When I was in Portland last fall, I went to a farmer's market and I saw so many apple varieties there. Yeah, it's amazing how many varieties there are beyond the few that we see in our grocery stores. There are Korean connections in this book as well, including the playwright Vivian Kaye, who lives in California, and her play Persimmons in Winter is about a pair of Korean sisters. Kaye collects persimmon trees. She says she's seen the t-shirt, introverted but will discuss books. Many of you can identify with that. She wants a t-shirt that says introverted but will discuss fruit trees. And then there's Carl Ferris Miller, who in 1979 was one of the first Americans to become a Korean citizen. And he started an arboretum there, which is still going. It's open to the public. It has 17,000 different species in it. It's the Chulopo Arboretum. He never married. He did adopt 4 Korean sons, which makes me wonder, was he maybe gay? There is definitely at least one gay man in this book, Dave Adams, who's raising palms and cycads. And the unusual thing is where he's doing this, which is in Boise, Idaho. Not the climate that you would expect for palm trees. So he does describe what he has to do in the winter. Many of them are in pots that have got to come in and crowd the house and the garage, and otherwise they get the ones that stay in the ground are wrapped up with light bulbs to provide a little bit of warmth and protect them. The things people do for their trees. And I totally understand. I understand. In my old garden in Edmonton, I had so many trees growing there. Some of you might remember if you're watching my channel then, I had cedar trees, spruce, pine, fir, fruit trees like different kinds of cherries, apple, Saskatoons. I had a green ash, I had a Manitoba maple, a Mayday tree, I had treeform lilacs and mountain ash, oaks, birch, willows. Yeah, many trees and shrubs. So I am going to be planting some in this garden here. Looking forward to seeing more trees here. And that's all I've got to tell you about today. So thank you so very much for watching. I do appreciate hearing from you, so please do say hello in the comments. And if you have any favorite trees, let me know, or just put in a little tree emoji down there. I wish you all happy reading, and I will see you all again soon. Bye for now.